Hey there, folks. I'm Matt Hansen,
And I'm John Johnson.
and you're listening to Planes, Trains, and Comic Books, the podcast where we discuss favorites we've reread, both classic and new comics we want to read, and everything else in between.
And here's the comic we picked this week.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Planes, Trains, and Comic Books. Today we are reading, or we're celebrating Black History Month because it's February and we do this every year. And we're finally reading a book that I've kind of heard about for a while and was interested in checking out, but was kind of saving it for Black History Month because I knew it was by a pretty popular Black creator. Rodney Barnes is the writer of this. And I don't think I've read any of his stuff, at least that I can think of. But I heard this is like his strongest book, or at least one of his strongest books. So I figured like, oh yeah, this would be a good one to start off the month. Have you heard of Rodney Barnes before this?
I actually was. I watched the Boondock Show on Adult Swim, and I only knew that when I like looked it up, and I was like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I watched that, so I totally like had been a little bit familiar with some of his earlier work because he'd done some stuff on TV, and then I will have to go back that he's done some Star Wars books, and more particularly, I know I've been talking your ear off about doing a side one review of the Blackula comic that he did last year. I'm really excited to finally sit down and read that this year. That's on my list. So
okay, yeah. So you were a little bit more aware than I was once you looked him up or whatever. See, I never watched Boondocks or anything, so I didn't have that connection to him, and I don't read Star Wars comics, so I'm really not. But anyway, but I saw him do an interview where he talked about like issue 33 of this or something that just came out recently. And in issue 33, I think it was like special because there was like a Spawn cover. Maybe Spawn actually shows up in the issue, so they were like tying that in. I know the most recent issue of Killadelphia had Savage Dragon in it, which is kind of cool. So it's definitely like firmly established in the Image pantheon or whatever.
That's badass. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I just saw like on the covers, they had those two characters. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then after reading this, I'm like, oh, that'd be a fun tag team, like have Spawn in one issue with the main character. And then you have Savage Dragon helping him out in the next one. So, or in like one close by that. So, he was talking about it and it just sounded really good. It sounded like he was really passionate about it. And that's one of the things like with a writer, you really want to, when I hear a writer talk about a book they're writing, I want them to sound passionate and really involved in it and loving it. And it seemed like he was really into it. So his enthusiasm made me want to read this even more. So yeah, we picked volume 1 of Killadelphia. Sins of the Father is what it's called. And, it is by Rodney Barnes on the writing, Jason Shawn Alexander on the art, who is also a Spawn artist. I don't know if you knew that or not, but he...
I think I saw that he did some Spawn art. His art kind of reminds me of Ben Templesmith a little, but I guess... Yeah,
without like the glow effect, I guess you could say. Yeah, there's no glow effect. It kind of looks like the stuff from Department of Truth a little bit. It's a little bit splattery, little Sienkiewicz mixed into it. But...
It's nice though. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it is good. So we start off in the first page or whatever, this first issue with a guy named Jim Sangster Jr. And Sangster I was like, man, this is gonna be, for some reason it's a hard name for me to say. I'm just gonna call him Jim Jr. But yeah, like he is in Philadelphia because his father died. He is a cop, and I guess he's like following up, like his dad was murdered. So he's, I guess, following up on the murder. He is a cop in Baltimore. His dad is a cop, or was a cop in Philadelphia. And he starts off by emailing his dad's, not partner, but like it's the medical.
I think chief medical examiner.
Yeah. Medical examiner. That's the word. So like I guess her and his dad work close together. And her name is Jose. And so actually I was telling John, I was like, how do you pronounce her name? Because I've never heard of a woman named Jose. And then I asked my wife, who is Hispanic, and she was like, I've never heard of any woman named Jose either. So then we did like a deep dive to try to figure out, maybe we're weird and we didn't know that was a female name. But apparently it's just a unique name for a female. That's what my wife said. So I was like, okay, we'll go with that. I was like, maybe he knew someone in his life that was named Jose and was a woman. So, but the reason why it matters is because later on, his dad is referencing someone named Jose, and then a woman shows up, and the son is talking to her, and I did not put two and two together that they were the same person. So that is why it kind of threw me when I first realized it. And I'll say this. I told John this earlier as well. This first issue was weird for me to get into. It took a while, and I actually had to read it twice because I missed a lot of stuff, because this writer does not hold your hand. He uses comic book language, like meaning either colors or things that should cue you onto what he's talking about, and doesn't like point it out. Like, for example, in a Marvel book, if you turn the page and they go to a different city, usually it will say, the team flies to New York, or they will just say, New York, or whatever. So, we've changed places. That is not the case in this book. This book very rarely holds your hand and tells you like something's changing as far as places or people. Also, the son and the father are both similar looking if they're far away in the shot, because the artist, while amazing and captures the atmosphere of this, is not super detail at far away images. So like if they're in the background talking, they're both police officers and they both are black.
Both wearing suits.
They're both wearing suits. And I'm like, okay, is that the father or the son who's talking right now? Because they both are talking to Jose in each other's timelines and stuff. So it's a whole thing. It took me a while to get into this, but I was telling John it was like an author that has a certain rhythm or pentameter or something. Like once you get into it, like it takes you a while to get into it, but once you get into it, you're like into it. Like it sucks you in and it actually makes it like you click into their work harder. So I felt very much like this, almost like reading a Cormac McCarthy book, or an author like that who has a very distinct style of writing. It always takes me like a couple pages to get into Cormac McCarthy, and then once I'm in, I'm like engrossed and sucked in because it's like we have a special language between each other or something. So I felt like that with this author. Like once I got it, and the next issues were all good, but this first issue really threw me. And I was telling John, I think potentially this could be a detriment to someone who's never read comics and is maybe handed this comic or finds it on the shelf as like a really good comic to read, because it is a really good comic to read. But if you don't know the kind of structure of comic direction, meaning like if someone's talking, one thing they do is they give them a specific color throughout the whole series. So the dad's narration is in red, the son's is in blue, the Jose's is in purple, and some other characters have other colors, but that's through the whole series. So if someone's narrating over some images that weren't referenced of where they're at, as you turn the page, who was talking because it's the color it is and stuff. So if you don't know that, then it might throw you a bit. But let's get into it. I just wanted to preamble that, getting into this issue, because it was kind of hard for me to get into, but once I got it, it was fine. So if our listeners try to read this, they might have a similar issue, but don't be disheartened. It just takes a second to get used to, and then it gets awesome. So did you have any issues reading this? I mean,
I don't think the only thing I missed was there was a point where it switches, and it's pretty early, where he switches from him writing the email to the father, and I didn't realize at first that we were following his father for a minute, and then I was like, oh wait, because he again, we didn't spoil because we said he was there because his dad was murdered.
Yeah,
we turned the pages, and after a few pages of following it, and he's murdered, and I was like, oh, that was the dad. Okay. And I went back and looked. I was like, okay, so it's like 10 days earlier.
You know what I missed is it does say 10 days earlier on the second page, but it's the only thing that's not in bold, like box or whatever. It's like just in black letters over some color in the background. So I think I fully missed that the first time I read it. And I was just reading the boxes and I'm like, okay, cool. And then I'm like, wait, this is the dad, or who am I talking to? Or who's talking right now? Because we start off with the dad he's looking at a board of I'm assuming it's his board of these murders that have been happening in the city. and he's looking at the picture of someone who's missing, but he knows this person specifically, and he's been talking to them, or they've been like in contact with him. His name is Tevin, right? Tevin Thompson, I believe.
Tevin Tompkins.
Tompkins, there you go. And it looks like he's fed up with this guy. I guess he's been after him, he's been after him is what it is. And it seems like the guy sent him a letter or something saying like, hey, I know you're after me. Come talk to me in this one place. He gets a phone call. That's what it is. Tevin calls him and says, hey, we got, I'm over here in this place. You better come over here. So basically the dad goes to this place, and this really reminded me of Cabrini Green or something in Candyman, or like one of those projects, I guess they call them.
Very much so.
Yeah, a lot of this felt like Candyman to me in a good way, which is, I'm not the biggest fan of that movie, but all of this, like the downtrodden areas of Philadelphia, really reminded me of kind of those scenes in Cabrini Green in the projects and everything. Did you have a similar?
Oh yeah, very much felt like that. And even the name Hell, it's a Harvest Green Homes, aka Hell Hall. Very much felt, like it kind of like a Hell's Kitchen, or just like the kind of like the worst place in town, as far as like, that's kind of like the area where people know like bad stuff happens and we don't go there.
Right. So as the dad goes there, I guess the night he died, he's looking for Tevin, and he's got his gun drawn because he's not sure what this guy was up to. And as he comes into Hell Hall, he turns the corner, and all of a sudden he's beset upon by hundreds of people. We don't know exactly what they are. They don't really show them clearly in the first couple pages, but the next page is the dad dead. So the dad's dead. We see the medical examiner, Jose, there, and the dad's partner, I'm assuming. But he's kind of in silhouette. So then this is the only page I didn't understand. And on this page, it says he put the son's narration says, I put my pop in the ground and I get my ass back to Baltimore. And it shows a train leaving what I assume is Philadelphia back to Baltimore. It shows the son on the train. But then I guess it's him thinking about his dad's funeral. Like he's thinking about it. But then he talks about, like, the next thing we see him at is he's in his family home in Baltimore. And he's like, I have all these bad memories of my home in Baltimore. Not in Baltimore, in Philadelphia. So I was like, wait a second. I thought he left Philadelphia. So I'm still not 100% on the series of events from him being on the train, going to his dad, like thinking about his dad's funeral, and then him being in his childhood home, which I'm assuming is Philadelphia because that's his dad's home now. Yeah. So I was confused. Did you understand this, or am I just
no, that's kind of how it kind of was weird. I wouldn't 100% either, because it seemed like, he was like going back, but then I was like, well, maybe because since it took us out from, showing the back story of his dad dying, maybe that was him on the train out to Philadelphia. I'm not 100%.
I guess that could be, but then the narration was saying something different. Like it was saying the opposite. So I got confused just from the image and what was going on in the narration. But regardless, that's like the only part that still confused me after the second reading. So, and it doesn't really matter, like, as far as like what happens in the story. I was just confused. So anyway, the son goes to his father's house. He has all these flashbacks of like, we're going to say the dad possibly abusing him as a child, or at least yelling at him and stuff. They don't show, like, he shows him grabbing his arm and the mom like holding the father back. So I'm assuming the dad was possibly a bit abusive. Did you get that from that?
Yeah, it definitely seemed like either abusive or just like
hot-tempered.
Hot-tempered. Exactly. He's a cop. I assume, it's like that. Not to throw all cops under, but stressful job. So
yeah,
they sometimes that comes home.
I saw The Wire. I know how it happens. Also, like, this did remind me of The Wire a lot. Like, I was kind of like, I wanted to go back to Baltimore and go back to, take on Stringer Bell or whatever from that show. So I don't know if you've seen The Wire, but it's fucking awesome and everybody should watch it. But yeah, so he, has all these memories flood back into him in his dad's house. He begins to cry and stuff because it affects him so much. But he also finds his dad's journal, and he's like, it would probably make him mad if I read this journal, so I'm going to, because he's fucking dead. So as he reads it, basically he finds out that over like the case his dad was working with Jose as the medical examiner, they figured out that vampires are real. They've been finding all these bodies with bite marks on them, and they've been going through like what could cause this, and also not just bite marks, but they're all drained of blood and everything. So after, I guess, coming to the only conclusion that it could be that it was vampires, they finally were like, okay, it's got to be vampires. That's the only thing I can think. So
it was weird. Like I did like that they kind of like tried to like place it, because they're like, they all have like a trace of like yellow fever, like jaundice and turning yellow and stuff.
Oh yeah. But, that was the other one.
But then their body are covered in bite marks, and they're like human bite marks for sure. So
right,
yeah. I just thought that was interesting. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, there was another section that I had to read twice to understand, where he's explaining that like there was one day where he was at the morgue or whatever with the examiner, and they were hearing like thuds and people slamming into the door behind the dead body storage door, and then he pulled his gun, and when they opened the door, nothing was in there. So I was like, wait, is that just in their head or what is going on? Like, but they both heard it. So I wasn't sure exactly what happened. But he wasn't attacked by vampires there.
Yeah. I think that was like a precursor, because I think in the next one, she also mentions like she has like a time frame of like,
well, she says that they have like say like after they die, they have like a 2-hour spasm or something. Then they go back to being dead, and then they rise, vampires or whatever. So
yeah,
I guess it was that, but they were all back in their, morgue beds or whatever, So
it shows the sunrise in the last thing. So that's the only thing I can think of, is they were going crazy.
Oh, I got you. Okay, yeah. Maybe that's the stuff where it's like maybe I'm missing the small hint that they're throwing out there.
That's because you're not a vampire expert.
It's because I'm not. Yeah. But anyway,
I'm a sucker for vampire stories. So
yeah. Hey, I know a lot about vampires. I've read, a lot of the lore for the books and stuff, but I just
like Twilight. I get it.
Yeah, I've read all the Twilight books. I've read, Dracula, of course.
This is the skin of a killer, Bella.
Yes. I don't remember. I've listened to the audiobooks one long drive, and it was one of the worst set of books I've listened to, because I listened to all 4 of them, by the way. But it was more of a like, let's see how bad these books are. Kind of like when you watch a bad movie or something. I had time. I was driving cross country and figured, why not? So anyway, but yeah, so in the dad's like figuring out of what's going on, and like, okay, if they are vampires, why are they here? And like, what's the connection to yellow fever? He noticed on a couple crime scenes that there was some graffiti that said Sons of the Republic. He looked that up, and it's ties back to Texas and something about like lineage of a society that was, any ancestors from Texas prior to the Republic of Annexation. They could band together in this group or some shit. But then basically it's just like, that's the name that certain peoples have taken like for themselves. And the yellow fever that's tying them together is all about John Adams. Apparently the only other outbreak of yellow fever in Philadelphia was tied to John Adams after he came back from the Caribbean on one of his vacations. And he's like, it seems like once he put those facts together, he's like, the dad figured out something. I wasn't 100% sure, but basically until you turn the page and he goes to the grave of John Adams, which is, I guess, in Philadelphia, and or Quincy, Massachusetts, it says, which I guess is close to Philadelphia. And so he goes there and he sees that the grave has been disturbed, but this was like something that happened a long time ago. The guy who tends to the cemetery says, but it's enough to make you think, okay, obviously maybe the reason why the tomb was disturbed is because maybe John Adams rose from the grave and is a vampire. But they're not going out right and saying that yet. Did you have any suspicions of that when the dad said like, holy shit, and then showed that his grave next?
Yeah, a little bit. I was like, are they really pulling some like, revolution American history into this, and like saying that I right away I was like, oh god, is there gonna be like like Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter? I was like, is there gonna be even like further back
Wow.
vampires or something?
Yeah, yeah.
So I was down right away. Yeah, and he's like got his ear to the grave, like trying to listen in.
Yeah. Andrew Jackson, Vampire Hunter or Vampire. That would be.
Oh, Andrew Jackson.
Yeah.
If any president was a vampire.
Yeah, an evil vampire, Andrew Jackson would be a good candidate. Anyway, so now the son like knows what his dad was on to, and he of course doesn't really believe it still, but he's willing to talk to Jose about it, so he does. He goes and asks her, and she's like, "Yeah, I totally believe it. We came up with that idea together." She explains why she thinks it's vampires, and then she's like, "Well, if you don't believe me, you could try out the place he was going to the night he died, which was what's it called, Hell Hall." And so his son goes there, and as he walks in, I assume it's the same room. This time the vampires are not prepared. They last time it was a setup. This time he just walks into a room, and it's very much like I Am Legend, like a scene from that movie, not the book, but the movie.
The movie.
And where like he walks into a room and there's just like fucking vampires just hanging out in there. And they're like, they open their eyes like they're bats sleeping upside down or something. And he's able to get out of there alive, but now he's like, oh shit, like it's real. It's fucking real. So that being said, he knows his dad was bit by vampires the night he died. He comes to the conclusion that I think most people would. My dad's probably a vampire. He goes to the graveyard where his dad was buried. He digs him up, and he has this really horrible story. Like, just illustrates another reason why him and his dad have a bad relationship. Of when his mom died, his dad like left him in his mom's waiting room to go get the car, or his mom's room to go get the car, and he saw his mom's last moments, and so he was freaking out about that as a kid, and he goes downstairs, and the first thing his dad says is, "So what took you so long, boy?" So it's like, obviously, if your son comes down from a room all broken up, you think he would be a little bit more nice about it, but yeah. So, and that's what his dad says as he opens the coffin for the first time. His dad's like, "What took you so long, boy?" And that's where the first issue ends. Pretty strong ending to a comic. I don't know if you were as enthralled as I was by then, but
very much so. Yeah. I was like, oh hell yeah, dad's coming back. Father and son who have had a bad past now going to have to work together or something.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
Yeah. So we start off the second issue with a grandma, an older lady in a hospital, and she's kind of on death's door as well. And we see this is actually Tevin Tompkins' grandmother, and he like totally pulls a Lost Boys and like hovers outside of her window of her hospital room and then comes in. And I guess he doesn't have to be invited because it's a hospital, right? Yeah. Or maybe that's not even part of this lore. They don't really go into the lore of these vampires other than sunlight burns them. And apparently anything organic can kill them, not just like a stake through the heart, but they made it sound like other stuff could too. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, I think they were saying like, yeah, like if it's organically made
of the earth,
you could like fashion a weapon of it, like you could hurt them with that.
Okay. Yeah, because I was like, well, metal's organic. Yeah. Lots of stuff is organic. Should we put it in a mold or something, right? So, anyway, yeah. So like they don't go into that quite yet. But Tevin goes to visit his grandma, and she's basically like, he's like, hey, I can make all this pain go away, Grandma. Like I want to help you, and she's like, no. Like I deserve what I get. I like wasted my life basically. Like I didn't do what I was supposed to when I had the time, and then I just kind of ended up not doing anything. And so that's like what my penance is, me dying now instead of living on. Because he doesn't tell her he's a vampire, but he basically says like, I can give you immortality. And she's like, why would I want that? So, he leaves all crying and everything, but it's a little scene that comes up later, which I thought was pretty good. Like it had impact when the grandmother's brought up later. But then we cut back to Jim Jr. and he's talking to Jose. He tells her like, hey, so I dug my dad up. He's he's at my house, I guess. If you want to come see him or whatever, he is alive. He's undead basically. And also, if you wouldn't mind bringing some blood, because you're the only person I know that has access to blood. So right here, I was like, hey, here's a vampire thing that's not part of this lore, is drinking dead man's blood doesn't seem to matter, right? Because he's giving him dead blood. Or they're giving him dead blood.
But maybe because it's dead blood, but it's like not that old. I don't know.
It doesn't matter literally, if the person's dead, you can't. I'm going by like Interview with a Vampire lore here, but
that's true.
But yeah, anyway, it's supposed to make him sick, but apparently that is not part of the lore here. So that's what I was talking about as far as like my vampire knowledge is based on, let's see, the books I've read: Dracula, Twilight, a bunch of the Anne Rice books, not all of them, and like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and like. That's pretty much it. Like, I can't think of any other vampire stuff. I guess Interview with the Vampire is Anne Rice. So, yeah, I can't think. What other ones are there? Or am I missing any?
Oh, like for me, I would have like most of the
Lost Boys.
Main, Lost Boys. Any of the John Carpenter's vampire stuff.
Okay.
True Blood.
Shut the fuck up with True Blood. You get out of here. That's the weakest vampires. That's worse than Twilight, in my opinion. But,
what? How dare you, sir?
Twilight is much more entertaining. Less boobs, but much more entertaining. in a like, I can drink this away in a funny way. But anyway, yeah. So she brings blood to his dad. His dad's like, great, because I was getting kind of peckish, and I can definitely hear you guys pumping away in there. So, so they give him the blood, and she does like kind of a little medical examination on him. He seems fine. But he's basically like, let's get right back into this case, you know? I'm here. I can fill you in on everything I knew that wasn't in my notes, and like, we'll get this guy. So, then we cut to a little girl walking in the street. She's by herself. It's in the middle of the night, and a car pulls up to her. And of course, it's a creepy guy who's like, hey, little girl, you want to ride home? And she's like, well, I'm not supposed to talk to strangers. And he's like, well, no, I'm an officer. And he pulls out his badge and he shows her. Of course, I think we knew where this is going. It kind of, if you've ever seen a vampire movie, you could pretty much guess what was going to happen here. But basically, she's a vampire. He's a skeezy cop who was going to try to do something possibly to her. They don't say 100%, but she says she reads his mind, and she knows what he was thinking about. At least,
yeah, so
we can infer that either he was thinking about it hard or he was going to do it. So she just tears him apart. I think it's a pretty good way to kill this guy. Sure, go for it. But actually, she doesn't tear him apart. She brings him to feed a bunch of people. So it's like she was the bait for them or whatever. But yeah, and then we cut to the house of is it the mayor or the governor?
Yeah, the mayor.
The mayor. So the mayor, he was introduced a little bit earlier, but it was really quick, where he's running for re-election. He's watching as a documentary or something on like black leaders, it looks like. And basically they just kind of show him a couple times, but basically later on they infer he's working with the main bad guys. And then they confirm that later on. So they keep showing him, and I kept being like, what's his connection to all this stuff? Because he's just being elected. But then eventually they show him in the room with the bad guys, and you're like, oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. Kind of. But
the one thing he was focusing on, and that's kind of makes sense with vampires, is like that, over the years, like what's the one thing that like gets people to like fall in line is fear. And right. So like, and he's like, fear creates kings. And so like, I think that's kind of like where he's like, oh, okay, like, yeah, that's probably what I'm going to be going for.
You think he was going to want to be a king, or he was going to make the citizens of Philadelphia rise up and be their own kings or whatever?
Like he was like for him to be
for him
control.
Only? Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
He's a politician, so I fully believe that. He's not like he's going to be looking out for people's actual interests or anything. But
yeah.
But yeah, it was kind of left because like later on when he's talking to the main bad guy, he's like, like I want to. He was saying it like he wants to help the people, but I think he was trying to like not only he was trying to put on like a front to the main bad guy. So, but yeah, so basically we just cut back and forth from the killing of this officer that this girl lured to all the vampires, and and Jim Jr. and Senior talking with Jose about what he thinks is going on and what they need to do. And basically the dad says, I know who the bad guy is. I figured it out. The bad guy is John Adams. I mean, like, that wasn't confirmed in the first issue. It was kind of hinted at. But he says, like, no, it's fucking John Adams. And then we see modern day John Adams walk up to the officer that's being strung up in front of all the vampires. And he's wearing a suit, like a modern day suit. I thought this was like, how do you interpret like a 1700s president into modern day? And he basically looks like a bearded Lex Luthor or something.
Yeah.
But I was like, that's a hard design.
It doesn't look like Paul Giamatti.
Yeah, exactly. They should have done that. I know what John Adams looks like, and it's Paul Giamatti. So because he was in that, if you don't know, he was in a John Adams HBO series. But yeah, like, I was like, I don't know. I mean, I guess so. Sure, why not? I mean, I don't know what he would look like nowadays, but I guess, you know, he probably was bald because they all wore wigs and stuff. So
yeah, because they all had what was it?
Lice.
Yeah, lice and some kind of
syphilis.
STD. Syphilis. There you go.
Yeah, their like faces were falling off and shit. So yeah, so he shows up and he's like, everybody's like, oh, it's the president. He's like, President Vampire. So obviously he's the main bad guy. And then here's my favorite thing about this comic, and I love that they brought this in, and I kind of hope, I don't know if they go further in this, with this idea later on, but President Vampire John Adams talks to Tevin, who's kind of like his right-hand man, who he was using as, you know, to lure the cop there and stuff earlier, to lure Jim Sr. there earlier. And he basically says, like, Tevin says, like, I don't want to be a part of your group anymore. Like, I've thought about it, and I think you're not actually offering what you say you're offering. Like, he basically says, like, you're offering some kind of weird version of the same thing that went bad in the early version of America, right? So, like, it's kind of like that American dream thing where it's like,
yeah,
America is supposed to be this, but then there's also slavery and other things going on.
So it's that
like,
with vampires.
So he's just saying, like, yeah, you might have the best of intentions and you want to really have that dream now, but somehow I think it's not really going to end up the way you think, just like this one didn't. And the thing I love is that Tevin is like, why can't we just be free? Like, I go my way, you do your thing. As long as you don't fuck with me, I don't fuck with you. So he's basically like, I'm an anarchist now that he's a vampire and he's immortal. And he's like, yeah, I'm an anarchist. He doesn't say those words, but I mean, that's what he's talking about. Like,
yeah,
why do we have to have democracy and a government and everything? Why can't we just be free ourselves and not have people fuck with us? And that is not part of President Vampire John Adams' plan. So
I love that you call him that. Like,
well, you got it.
That's his full title.
That's the full title, right? So, but like, yeah, so he doesn't go into it. Like, he doesn't say like, well, fuck you or whatever. He kind of lets it slide. The president does. But there's definitely tension there, right? Like, obviously, it seems like maybe Tevin has read some philosophy books or political theory books or something. And he has some ideas about how people should actually be free and whatnot. So that's what I like. I liked that they threw that idea in. It's not something, in this context, it makes perfect sense. If you're immortal, like, you don't have to worry about living, then why do we need a government to be there at all? Like, why can't I just do my thing and you do your thing and we don't fuck with each other?
Yeah, I like this whole part too. Kind of what you're getting at. Like, first off, we didn't mention Brittany calls him father, so we assume that he turned her at some point.
And Brittany is the little girl that lured the creepy cop to the feast.
Yeah. So we figure she's father, and I wasn't sure, you know.
But also, I mean, obviously he's white and she's black. She's a black girl. I don't think I said that earlier. But so if she's calling him father and it's John Adams, either it's a slave child like a Thomas Jefferson thing, or
that's what I was curious if they were gonna. Yeah, I was like, oh, are they gonna like play into like the old founding father Thomas Jefferson thing that, you know, we know what happened,
right? But also we know. I think we know. Well, I don't know off the top of my head, so don't quote me on this. But I'm not sure if John Adams had that as well. So that might not fit historically. But they do show later on that he was the one who turned her and her sister into vampires. So
So that makes sense that he's father.
Yes, exactly. So, so we like once we get there, like the interaction of the president and Tevin, and like their like little beef that's starting. We cut to.
Oh, but wait, there's one more thing I want to say about this part that I really liked is because one of the things I really like about vampire lore and vampires like trying to like ascend and like become like the majority or whatever, like control of society, like is kind of seemingly John Adams' goal here. It's like because he even says in Tevin's like, well, either fold to you whatever you want to do with this new American dream society with vampires, or become food or death. And it's like I like that idea in society. And there's been some movies and some things that have fallen on it of like, how do you have like vampires be in control of society because they have to eat other people, and some people get turned into vampires and some people just become food, but like then eventually your food runs out. Like how does this all work out? Like,
right.
You're gonna have like human slaves down the road just to make more vampire. Like there's a lot of make more food. There's a lot of
well, I mean, there's blood banks nowadays, John. Why couldn't there just be blood banks that feed them?
Yeah, I mean that could too, and then we could have True Blood where you
voluntary blood giving.
Yes,
for humans,
I know,
they get
but I'm
paid
just saying.
for it,
I just like the idea of like there's so many different ways that
I'm just going down the Tevin road of this could all be voluntary, human freedom transactions, right?
No, for real. And that's where I was gonna say is like, and Tevin's like, no, that's BS. Like, there's got to be another way. And I like that too. I like the idea of like, no, I'm John Adams, and like I've been through all of this, and like now that I've been a vampire for all of this, like I can also be the one to like, yeah, like of course, like because he was a president too, and now he's lived as a vampire for all this. Like he's like, of course I am the one who can save us.
Well, yeah,
and like make society work and all. That's all. I just thought that was a fun juxtaposition for this.
Yeah,
like okay, cool.
Yeah, for sure. It was definitely like a fun little reveal and them talking and stuff. So. So anyway, the father and son, Jim Jr. and Sr. and Jose they came to the conclusion that, wait a second, there's a bunch of, like, if all these vampires or all these people are being turned into vampires every night, they're getting more and more, and they seem to be escalating every night. So it's not just like in the shadows anymore. It seems like they're planning to have a full out attack on people in Philadelphia and turn a lot of people in one night. So they're like, well, we got to try to stop what we can. There's a bunch of bodies in the morgue. We got to go kill them. We don't know who's vampires and who's not, but we got to put a stake through the heart of everyone. So they basically do that. They go to the morgue. They start stabbing bodies. Some are vampires, some are not. But then they basically have like the first big fight scene where they open up the freezer and all the bodies are vampires and they're already turned. They're not just sleeping. And they rush out of the freezer and we have this giant vampire fight start. Then we cut back to Tevin, who's going to visit his grandma again, and we see that she has actually passed. And I guess this is what makes him realize like he doesn't want to be he doesn't want to follow some other person's plan for him, like basically his grandma was sad about her not taking her own initiative in her life, so he wants to take his own initiative in his life. So he's basically deciding like to go against the president, and he's saying like he's going to make his grandma's name live on. Everybody's going to remember it because we're assuming he's going to do something dramatic. So that is the end of issue 2. Then issue 3 is kind of like a middle issue. It's all about President John Adams and how he got here. So this is where you find out like, some of his back history of, he was going when he went to the Caribbean, what happened there and whatnot. This is intercut with the scene at like it picks up right where we were in the morgue. So this vampire fight's happening with Senior, Junior, and Jose, and they're surprisingly pretty good at killing vampires for not being vampire hunters, right, John?
Yeah, no, like they took to it easy, and that's one thing too is they'll like being with the Senior, he's a vampire, so he'll have extra strength, and in some lore, young vampires are like extra strong because they don't know how to control things yet. So I don't know. But it's interesting. Like
they do look more feral than the other ones, right? Like they look like they've been starved, and the way Jason Alexander draws the vampires is very like they're very lanky and gaunt and really long arm movements and stuff. It's very visually impactful.
Yeah.
So another thing I will bring up as far as vampire lore is these are the disease version of vampires. This is not like a demon inhabiting your body like say Buffy is, because in Buffy, when you become a vampire, like it's just inviting a demon into you, and the demon is the vampire that's kind of controlling your dead body. But in this, it's like you have a disease that you caught and it brings you back from the dead and reanimates your tissue. Mm-hmm. So just for anybody following along with their bingo card of vampire stuff.
Yeah, this is truly the undead vampire.
Right, exactly. So so they vanquish all the vampires, as you do. And then, we cut back to President Hamilton. And now, like I said, we're going through how he became a vampire. How is
President Adams?
Sorry, who did I say?
You said it, Hamilton.
Oh, that's because
who was never president.
That's because they're talking about Hamilton in this. My bad. He's basically saying like going through his history as President John Adams. My bad. And then he's talking about living in the nowadays later, and he talks about going to see this play called Hamilton. And they were making fun of him in it because I guess I haven't seen Hamilton, but apparently John Adams is a bit of a laughing stock in it. And so he was like, motherfucker, like, how dare you?
Hold on. You still haven't seen Hamilton?
I could give two fucks about that. No.
Oh, okay. I thought it was.
It's not my thing. I'm not the biggest musical person anyway. And then two, look, if I just want my history. Like I want it dry and I want it plain. I don't like having
you don't have to have flair in songs.
No, I don't. I don't want any of that. So no, thank you.
Okay, you're fine.
I'll read a book about John Adams or whatever, or Hamilton if I want to learn about him. But I'll listen to hardcore history. That's the only flair I like is Dan Carlin reading it. So yeah. Anyway, if you don't listen to hardcore history, you should. It is the best. It's one of the best podcasts out there, I'll say for sure. Although every episode's like 5 hours long and takes about 8 months to get out. But, it's good stuff. But, yeah, so anyway, he's like recounting kind of the hardships he had as president. And then, like I said, talking about seeing Hamilton and being like, what the fuck? So this is like part of his motivation is like the way he's like, I want my name to be remembered better than Hamilton. And since everybody loves Hamilton, it really irks him about that. That everybody's laughing at him in it. So, and then they talk about, or he talks about they recount, how he actually went to the Caribbean on a vacation after he was president with his wife. They went to like a tour of a local village, and I guess the tour guide was working with the vampires that run this village or are inhabiting this village. And so him and his wife ended up being massacred in this vampire village. And I guess they were left to be raised again. They do say, and I will say this is a bit of not a story plot point that I was like, I don't know about that. But they do say like, oh, I don't even know where my wife was. And this is him talking about it. He says like he said Abigail was spared immortality. That's what John Adams says as he like recounts rising from the dead in this village. So his wife, Abigail, was, he says, for no reason other than to make us not suspect later that she isn't dead, that like she's dead. It's very, I didn't like that part. What did you catch that or have any thoughts?
Yeah, I did. I because he wakes up and then she's like, they spared her. I was like, so wait.
They spared her immortality.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that. So they just ripped her apart, or what? Like,
yeah, that's what that would mean. Because they drank her blood, threw her in the blood pile or whatever, the body pile, and she didn't become a vampire. Basically they ripped her apart, is what I got from it, instead of like leaving her to be a vampire, right?
I did the part about this that kind of like was like, to me is like he goes to the Caribbean and his guide takes him to this place and they're, and it's a trap or whatever. And he gets taken over and they get eaten by the vampires or whatnot. But then the guide's like, hey, also take this book. This book has
Oh yes.
the answers of the human mysteries, and with it, you can rule the world. I was like, wait a minute now.
Yeah, why would you give that to this guy? Just
Why are you giving the white man who just came here for vacation?
Maybe he knows he was the president or something. I don't know.
Maybe
they wanted someone to rise up, and they figured a white guy back then would be the one to do it.
Yeah, maybe
that's what it is. And they figured it doesn't, like, once you're a vampire, race doesn't matter. That's actually what it seems like in this as well. No one says. I mean, for someone who was born in the 1700s, John Adams is pretty open-minded nowadays, as far as who he's turning and having in his followers, right? Group of followers. So
yeah, his right-hand man and one of his daughters,
right, are black. So like, it seems like once you're a vampire, like race and stuff doesn't matter to you as much, apparently, or at all. So I mean, maybe that's what they were going for, is here's this book, you can, like, in this world, you will be able to use this more than us. But they don't say that. This is all me inferring from what you had a question about. So like John said, they give him this book that's like, the answer to everything, but it's in like ancient Sumerian or some shit. So he can't read it, and he hasn't really figured out how to dig into it or get the secrets out of it yet. At least we think so. That was another kind of red herring story point. They just said he wasn't able to read anything about it. Like he says, like, I haven't been able to break the secrets in private, but then later on that might not be true. So just like his wife, so she's dead, and then later on that might not be true. So those are some of the only like actual story points I'm like, that could have been figured out better, a way to like not just lie to the reader kind of thing, to get that shock value up later on or whatever. But anyway, so like I said, we're cutting back and forth between the president and the family. And also we're cutting back to Tevin, who's talking to some of the other vampires. He's questioning things with them. He's like, so I got questions about the Prez's plan and some of these other guys. One guy that's got like this big ass top hat, they call him Tops. And they're like, or they call him Top or Toppy. And I guess because he's got a big top hat, I'm assuming.
I love that he has like this band of like, it looks like a Suicide Squad of like vampire assassins, friends, or whatever, or something for friends. Yeah. Like, cause they're all very unique in like their clothing. And I assume it's like either like the time period they were picked up in or something.
That would make sense. Yeah.
That's the only thing I can think. Cause like one's punk, one's kind of looks like maybe she was
goth or something.
Goth or yeah.
S&M or whatever.
Hat looks like maybe he was like from New Orleans or voodoo or something. The one girl looks like she's maybe was like, I don't know, like some kind of rogue assassin.
She was like a future assassin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. They all have a very distinct looks, but I will say they didn't really use them to that effect too much. So, but they are like a crew. Yet. They are like the enforcers, we'll say. And Tevin was apparently either part of them or very acquainted with them. Maybe he was even leading them at some time, but it seems like Tevin and Toppy are having beef now that Tevin is questioning the leader and the president, and they even let him walk away saying like, man, why can't we just be free? Why do we have to have this fucking system, you know? And he talks about how the system is fucked, like how since America was around, it's always had issues and it's never really lived up to its promise and all that stuff. So, and then this is where like we find out we cut back to the president, and as he comes back from the Caribbean in his story of retelling how he became a vampire, basically I just got that they came back and they pretended like they were just sick from yellow fever, and that's what the dad found out, right? Like, I guess when, they came back, they said they had yellow fever, and that's why they were staying indoors during the day. And then we see the president turn, I'm assuming the sister of, or maybe someone, I don't know if it's the sister or one of the black girls. I'm not sure if it's the black girls, Brittany and her sister, or if it's other servants that they had back then that he bites. But then we also see that the wife is there with them.
Yeah, it was weird, like, because it goes into the thing where it kind of like it shows that obviously he's been through history, and it says Abigail and I returned, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, so she was spared immortality, but they did leave her alive, or
But they
okay.
didn't, because she is a vampire.
Yeah.
So I don't understand.
She's a vampire. I saw. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
an odd mark for sure.
Yeah.
But I did like him going through the time of like seeing how the world changes over time, and his his very interesting, like, I don't know, like his dapper look kind of like turned into, like you said, kind of like Lex Luthor-y.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. It shows like the progression over these decades in like one long walk. What's it called?
One Beatles cover.
Yeah, like a Beatles cover. Like it's like him walking in different generations where he's changing his look each time. Yeah, that was fun. But then we get this sad. I thought this was sad, but maybe I'm wrong. If you're a woman, it might be different. But so obviously, him and his wife were in the 1700s, and they had whatever kind of bad situation for women back then, and how they and their husbands were dealt with each other. And so later on, we see that the wife has basically given up on him, or they've like split up since then, because she's like, I'm like a modern lady now. Like I want to fuck other people and not you anymore. And like, why are we even like it's till death do us part, and we're both dead. So why are we even staying in this relationship? And I thought it was kind of sad, because John Adams was like, but I love you. But then at the same time, it's like, well, yeah, but she was probably like his property back then. So she might not have had the same affection towards him as he did to her for most of her life. And then she realized, after being undead for a couple centuries, that, wait a second, I don't have to be with this asshole. Like, I can be my own woman. So I thought that was funny and good. But yeah, so then we cut back to Junior and Senior, and they've come up with a plan. Now that the dad is a vampire, he's like, well, I could go back to Hell Hall, where I was killed, and they'll accept me because I'm a vampire now, and maybe I'll be able to figure out, you know, what's the plan for how they're going to start this thing. And so he does that. He goes there, and he's got his gun drawn and shit, but they see him, and the vampire's like, what's up, bro? Like, they basically don't give a fuck. And then and he's kind of like, God damn it, like, this is not going to be, I don't know, it's kind of sad that no one cares that he's there or anything. And then we see the president go down to a sex club that he keeps, where he is able to get dirt on people. Is that what you got from this?
I think this is basically like how they control high society.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they invite rich people or powerful people to their sex club that his wife runs, and then there's big orgies, and then they get blackmail material on all of these important people, and then that is how they have spread their or turn them into vampires.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's probably more of that, right? I mean, I guess I thought it was blackmail too, but I will say this is a pretty graphic, sexually comic, right? Like it's got a lot of nudity and stuff in it for these certain scenes, which I was like, wow, they're really for an Image comic. Usually, you don't get this much nudity in an Image comic, I will say, but just be aware of that. I mean, it is a mature title, and it's, you know, very violent, so I'm not handing this to kids anyway, but, you know, there's nudity as well. So, but there's one specific page where they show a vampire orgy happening with all these people as they're turning them, and it's a very graphic panel of a woman riding a dude, and she's like vampired out and slits his throat and shit. So, but she's like naked, covered in blood, and I was like, wow, that is an image for a poster. That should be a poster for this book.
It should be. And I've already watched. That's where I'm going back to True Blood. I've already seen all this, so this is nothing.
Yeah, this is nothing to you. You've seen everything.
HBO had, you know, there has to be boobs and blood on the screen every like 10 minutes, or, you know, they can't continue the show.
Yeah.
But one thing I wanted to say too is like, so like, I think the way John Adams is like it kind of makes sense, like whatever, like they wear wigs anything or whatever anyway. But I really thought it was interesting how they drew how she looks.
I did too. She looks smoking hot, I'll say that.
she does not look like the plain paintings of,
no, she looks like a dominatrix
Adams that I have seen.
She's wearing like chains and corsets and tight dresses and shit.
Sure, once you're a vampire, like, you know, you become like a really like tempting, like, best version of yourself normally, right? Like, and you're luring, that's kind of part of it.
Although
But, like,
they did show a
much,
bunch of fat vampires that were in the hell house, the hell hall area.
Maybe they're young vampires. I don't know.
No, but that's the thing. John Adams and her weren't young, right? When they
that's true. I don't know. But yeah, I did think that was interesting that she's very much like, oh yeah, I'm totally plain Jane Abigail Adams. Like, don't mind me and my leather corset.
Yeah,
and my, like,
into
she's got rosy dimples, and I just thought it was fun.
Yes, I thought it was fun too. I thought she was smoking hot, so I was fine with it. But then we cut back to Jim Sr., and like I said, he's in this hell hall where he was killed, and no one seems to give a fuck that he's there. And he starts having depressive thoughts. He's saying, like, to himself, my wife is dead. My only son hates me. I no longer serve a purpose. Why do I give a shit? And so he leaves, and he kind of thinks about committing suicide. Like, he leaves while sunrise is about to happen, and as he pulls into his apartment or his son's apartment, I guess it's his apartment. Yeah, it must be his house or whatever. But he like, the sun's hitting him and he's starting to smoke, So, but he does go inside. He doesn't let himself die because he can't. I guess he's got to see it through. He's got to help his son figure out all this stuff. So, then we turn to the fourth issue. And we get the massacre night, right? This has been building up with the vampires. This is their first plan of action in their plan, or the first course of action in their plan is to have a massacre night where they murder, it said 1/3 of all of Philadelphia, but they just have a bloody fucking night, just breaking into houses, breaking everywhere. Any police that are trying to shoot at you and shit, it doesn't matter because you're vampires, so you just murder them and everybody else as well. And so, yeah, I thought it was an interesting thing. It was something that I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, they very rarely have that moment in vampire movies. I can't even think of one where, like, the vampires get so far in their plan that they actually massacre, like, 1/3 of a town. And then to think about, like, what humans would think of that,
Yeah.
Until that night, vampires are not real. And then you wake up in the morning and 1/3 of the town is dead, and you have to be like, vampires, I guess? I don't fucking know.
And like, is the government going to try to spin that, or is it like, what the hell happened?
I mean, obviously it was false flag, John. I read Department of Truth. I know what happens with this stuff.
Yeah, there's no such thing as vampires. So.
Yeah.
But no, I liked it a lot. I thought it was cool. Like, it very much felt to me like a cross between, like, what a lot of the vampires wanted to do in a lot of stories, or like Blade. Or oh man, there's that one that actually is pretty good, where, like, vampires are able to create that futuristic society.
Daybreakers or Daywalkers?
Yeah, Daybreaker or whatever. Yeah, I think Daybreakers.
Daybreakers, yeah. That's
and yeah, so it's kind of cool to see kind of a middle ground where it's like, we're like, oh, they're actually getting to a point of, like,
yeah, they're getting to that, like, middle section that they always skip over in vampire movies. Like, either it's Daybreakers or it's pre this moment, right? Like in Blade, they're like, we want to get to this point where we take over and start attacking whole cities, but they never get there. And then they skip the middle part in Daybreakers, and they just go to, we've already conquered civilization and we're the leaders or whatever. So
yeah, I think the only one that gets anywhere, I guess, close, technically True Blood. Like, again, they have some similar things,
John?
But I'm just saying, but 30 Days of Night, since that technically,
yeah, but that's a one tiny town.
That's true. It is
it's
a tiny
in Barrow,
town,
Alaska, with like 40 people there or whatever. So that don't count. But anyway, so in this night, before everybody, has woken up and stuff, we see Jose and Jim Jr. on not a date, but you can tell they kind of have a relationship building. They're walking with each other. They're eating food from, like, a sidewalk vendor or whatever. And as they're walking past a train station, they see, or a metro station, they see in the window a bunch of vampires, like, massacring everybody in there. And then all of a sudden they burst out of the windows, and Jim Jr.'s like, run to my car. And then they have to, like, run through the streets away from all these vampires. I did think that they just, like, cut away at that point. And I'm like, they could have had, like, a really cool car chase scene or something there. There could have been, like, they get away real easy. I'll say that. Like, there's no, like, the vampires don't seem very fast after you get away from them for, like, 10 seconds. You know what I mean?
Agreed. I was hoping like, yeah, we would get in the car, like no key dropping, but like in the car and like the vampires like swarm the car and he's gonna like, like swerve away or I
Yeah,
don't know. I was hoping for a little bit of a
something.
chase.
But
But
they
yeah,
just
it goes
cut to
from
them being at
in the
home.
car and then bam, hey dad, guess what we just got out of? It was crazy.
It was insane. They started their first part of their plan. Then we cut to City Hall and we see the mayor is, as you might have guessed, talking with the president because that's who he's working with, and the president's wife Abigail, or ex-wife Abigail, and
President Vampire John Adams.
yes, President Vampire John Adams, and the mayor is like, "I'm so glad we're like on the same page, and this is great." And basically they're like, "Yeah, this is great," and then they fucking kill him, which I thought was like he should have figured that shit out early. Like, what do they need you for, mayor? Mayor's not even like that powerful of a thing.
No, I'm totally part of the plan, right, guys?
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Yeah, it
you
just
need
reminded
me. You need me.
It reminded me of like a lot of any kind of people like that in movies and stuff. Whenever there's like a grand master plan with bad guys and like the little politicians always try to weasel their way in, it never ends good for them. But once we see them like, talking and it seems like it's going okay. They haven't killed him yet. Then we cut back to Tevin, who's talking to Topsy again. And they're saying like, oh, we're waiting for the word on something. And basically they're waiting to raid the police department. They get the signal. They go raid the police department and massacre everybody, including Jim Sr.'s old partner, who did not believe that there was vampires. So now he does, I guess. And then Tevin, I guess, leaves them is what I get. He's like, okay, now we've massacred. I'm out. I got to go do something. And he shows up at Senior's house with, Junior and Jose are there too. And he basically says like, hey, you want to talk? And Senior's like, what the fuck are you doing in my house? And Tevin's like, well, like, now you're one of us and I don't like us. And I know you're trying to take us down. So let's fucking do this thing. So basically he teams up with Senior and they all agree like, yeah, we're going to team up and stuff. And then we also see like inside the house as the father and Tevin are having their conversation, we see the first kiss of like the romantic relationship happening between Jose and Jim Jr. So that's going on in the house. And then, like I said, we cut, like these are all cut back and forth like really quickly. So basically, like I said, the mayor is talking to them. He gets killed. While the father is outside talking to Tevin, it turns out that Topsy followed them and he's like, motherfucker, you betrayed us. What the fuck? And how dare you kind of thing. Also, when we get to the fourth issue, because that's like right after this, we learn, they just say this, but we learned that one of the two daughters of the president was turned into a human by Tevin. And I think we might have forgot to say this. I might have forgot to say this. Tevin, because he was the president's right-hand man, was given the book of power, or whatever it's called, the book of the dead, or whatever we'll call it, to like keep safe, I guess, until the president could be bothered to learn ancient Sumerian.
Yeah, because the president had a bunch of people all over these hundreds of years. Nobody's been able to figure out how to read it, supposedly. And so he's like, Tevin, you're my right-hand guy. Keep hold of this for me. You're obviously never going to be able to read this. Ha ha ha. So just keep hold of this for me. And like, when I need it, like you'll be there to give it to me or whatever. Now let's go, now let's go forward with my plans or whatever.
Right. So I guess it's been 10 years. So Tevin, in his awesome Tevinness, figured out that you don't just like learn how to read this book. It speaks to you through like your soul or your spirit or whatever. So like, or maybe your will. Like basically the more you try to decipher it, the more undecipherable it becomes. But if you just kind of put your hand on it and think happy thoughts, we'll say, it starts to respond to you. Is that basically what you got from it? That's what I got.
That's exactly what I got for it. I was like, okay. It's like you have to let go of
you have to shake hands with the universe, as I like to say.
Yes, you have to let go of your selfish wants and whatnot and let the book come to you. You don't go to the book.
Yes. So Tevin in these 10 years has figured out the secrets of this book. So he's got this extra magic ability that he's starting to use. And part of the way he started to use that is he turned one of the president's daughters, who are the two black servants that they had that they turned into vampires and then treated like daughters at that point, when they were in the 1700s. So he turned one of them with this magic human again. And the other girl, who was Brittany, is the young daughter, she's still a vampire, and she's like, I want my sister back. So she goes to visit her sister, and her sister's like, no, I want you to like be a human again. Like I couldn't handle not feeling the sunshine on my skin and all that kind of stuff. And like, they're not really our parents. They just kind of turned us after we got sold. And don't you remember Mom and Dad? And we were slaves and all this stuff. So pretty fucked up childhood these kids had. And maybe I kind of had to thought like maybe Brittany doesn't have the same feelings because she is a vampire, and she doesn't like those emotions aren't part of her anymore. As like now that the sisters turned back to human, maybe she's having these feelings more or something. Did you get that at all?
Yeah, I think so. I feel like that maybe she like, so the sister that's turned back into human is like, okay, like, I definitely feel like I've gone past that. So like, you should too. And she's like, well, I do miss my sister. So I don't know. It's kind of like she's kind of hard to read on the, although she did bring the guy to the mass feeding thing earlier too. So
yeah, she seems to be more into the plan maybe than her sister was, her older sister. But
yeah,
the older sister does say like, look, you don't have to not be a vampire anymore. I can take care of you. Why don't you just, be friends with me or like stay with me, and I'll just like, keep you safe during the day and make sure you get some food that's not like murdered or whatever. So, so like, it seems like a pretty good way to like offer her, but when she turns around, her sister's already flown out the window. So I'm not sure how much she heard of that, but seems like maybe she's in too deep. But you know what? I guess I was wrong that the partner was killed, the dad's partner, because I thought they showed him at the police station getting his throat slit when they raided it, when the vampires.
I think that guy just looks similar. He was just the guy at the front desk.
Once again, some people look similar in this, and it could be confusing. But we do cut to the partner arriving. I guess the dad called him to help them out. And he's like, hey, what the fuck's going on, when he sees Tevin there, because he knows Tevin was like a suspect in the death and the crimes and everything that they were following. And so he's like, he draws his gun, and the dad's like, no, he's working with us now. Vampires are real. Don't worry about it. We're cool. And then we cut to Brittany, who's still sad from talking to her family, or her sister, and she decides to go on like a massacre. I liked this scene a lot, where some police, all this massacring has been happening. I guess maybe there's like, I don't know why they're where they're at, but she just comes out of nowhere and flies in the middle of them, and they get so surprised that they draw their guns on her. And then she basically just massacres all of them, rips their heads off and stuff. Pretty fucked up, because she's just mad about the whole situation with her sister. Yeah. But I thought it was a pretty sick scene. Like, as far as like, I could see that in a movie or a TV show, and it'd be pretty like, holy shit. But
yeah, very, very much so. And again, because she's a little girl, at least the size of, like, it definitely makes it more like, holy crap.
Yeah. So now that's the father and Junior and the rest of the team are now fully assembled. We got the dad's partner, we got Jose, we got Tevin. They're all working together now. There's like, okay, let's do this thing tomorrow or whatever. And they like are standing outside of the dad's house's door. And as they're doing that, we see Topsy and the other vampire group that were like part of Tevin's crew with the vampires. They're watching all of this, and they're like, motherfucker, here's our Benedict Arnold right here. And they see Tevin, so they immediately attack. Like right away, we get the next issue starts, and they attack, and it looks like it's going to be a bloodbath, because there's only 2 vampires with, our guys, and there's like 5 of them. And but Tevin just puts his finger up, and it's like, no, and like uses some kind of magic hold on them, and they're frozen in place. And then he proceeds to burn them all, but not all the way, which I thought was a stupid move. I think he kills everybody except for Topsy, and I don't know why he doesn't finish the job.
Yeah, because he's already pissed at him, so you know he's gonna like want to, like, it's one of those things like that's like Blade fucking like not killing the one guy. He's like, hey, we're gonna try something else, and like we'll just let you suffer. Ha, ha, ha.
Yeah. That's basically what he
Tell you
says is like, I'm going to burn you so bad, you're not going to be able to recover until dawn. And then you're going to burn from the sun. And he leaves him there. And I think as readers, we all know that means he's definitely going to show up later and fuck some shit up. So, anyway, now that, you know, the family and team there are like, holy shit, like, yeah, we need to move fast. They are like, okay, we need to go to confront, the president, and we know where he'll be. He'll be at City Hall. And so the father and Tevin go to City Hall to confront him. And then everybody else, I'm not sure, everybody else is kind of going around, and they're supposed to help, I guess. Okay, so here's the plan. Tevin and Senior, because they are vampires, are going to fight the president. Then the detective's partner, Dad's partner, is going to get all of the police force to go with them on this, because now everybody knows vampires are real because they had that massacre. So he's going to say, hey, everybody, I know where their nests are. Everybody bring flamethrowers, get SWAT out, and we're going to hit these specific buildings that they're all living in. So he's got like 2 other or 3 other buildings that he's going to have SWAT teams hit. Then we have Junior and Jose, and they're going to burn Hell Hall, I guess, just on because they want to, like, right? Like,
I guess it's like I don't know. It's like a
symbolic
the
thing.
original,
Yeah,
the original nest basically, or something.
Yeah. So that's what they do, and I thought it was funny. They actually show the Rocky statue in this fight scene where the father and Tevin confront the president. Did you think that was funny or care?
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah, I could. It's fun. It's and the one, it's the older dad's like, yeah, you know, Rocky's great, blah blah blah, and the Tevin's like, yeah, I liked Creed.
Yeah, Creed was my thing. I never saw Rocky 3 because that's where the statue's from, Rocky 3. And the dad even quotes Mr. T where he says, where they say, what's your prediction for the fight? And he says, prediction, pain. Hell yeah. It's like, so they, as they're there looking at the statue, all of a sudden the president shows up and he's like, you know, hey, let's do this thing. And also, like, Tevin thinks he's not sure how much the president knows about this book, right? Like, he knows the president had this book for longer than 10 years, right? He had it for a couple hundred years. So maybe he does know more than he said. Now, my problem with that is the president, in his own words, told us, the reader, he couldn't figure it out. And that's why he gave it to Tevin. So it's kind of a conceit that you have to live with story-wise. But I don't like it when writers do that, where they kind of fool you as the reader by telling you misinformation earlier, and then they say, nah, it was this. And you're like, but you're the one who told me. You have to have the character think that, not me think that. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess you couldn't figure out a better way to hide it or whatever. But so Tevin isn't sure if the president knows magic or not, like he does, but he's hoping he doesn't, because then that will make this fight go better. But immediately the president like holds up his hand, and Senior begins either choking himself or being choked, and then he grabs his neck. I couldn't tell which, but Tevin shoots the president with his own little beam of magic, and they have a bit of a Saiyan fight, I guess we'll say. Or maybe like Gandalf that. And Saruman fight back and forth.
Yeah, and this is like you said, like he's like, oh, you deciphered the book. Even my academics couldn't like really get into it. And he's like, yeah, hell yeah, man. And like that's why I bet you didn't see that shit coming. I threw that shit before I came in the room.
Yeah.
And but yeah, then he's like, oh yeah, well, you know, Gatling gun.
yeah, Gatling cannon.
And yeah, so it was kind of like you, okay, so us as the reader, we can kind of infer that was probably coming because of the way that it was, but it was weird, yeah, that he was like, oh, he doesn't know.
Well, see, yeah, we could have inferred that if he just said, like, if he just left it hanging, like, here's the book, and maybe he told, if he told Tevin I couldn't figure it out, that's one thing, but he told us that he couldn't figure out either, like in the narration. So
that's true.
That's like his personal thoughts to us, the readers. So that was my problem, is because he did that, I was like, oh, he doesn't know it. And then now it looks kind of like a cheap mystery, right? Like a cheap reveal or whatever. But it could have just been like, said it to Tevin like you did, and then we would have either bought it or we would have thought maybe he's not, maybe he knows more than he does, kind of thing. But either way, he knows more magic than Tevin, because he had the book for hundreds of years. So he ends up beating Tevin, so much so I thought Tevin actually died. Like, and one of the cool things, as they're like releasing this power, the president uses so much power to blast Tevin with one of these magic blasts that like his fingernails grow out and he gets more like vampire old school looking, which I thought was fun. But because he's distracted by Tevin, the dad, senior, is able to stab the president through the chest or through the heart with, a stake of some sort. I don't know if it's wood or whatever, but, and the thing is, these vampires don't just vanish like in Buffy. It takes him a long ass time to begin to die. Like, yeah, he sits down on the ground and isn't really a threat. But there was one part in this where they're like, hey, like, you're dying, I stabbed you. And then they have like a full conversation about like, their plan and how this wasn't going to work and how Tevin's like happy that he's free now and stuff. And then we cut away from that to see what's happening at the other places. We see Junior and Jose are fighting all the vampire hordes in Hell Hall, and they like firebomb it and all this crazy shit. I was like, good God, like this would be insane to see in a show. And also you have to think like the police are hoping that this is correct. You know what I mean? Like, hopefully we're not firebombing an actual house full of living people and not.
Yeah, they're definitely all vampires.
Right. Like, how would you know? You wouldn't know, I guess. So you found all the bones and maybe some of them had sharp teeth or whatever. But yeah, I was like, this is a lot for the police to believe, but they did just have a massacre, throughout a third of the city. So I guess they'd probably believe anything, like in any kind of emergency situation. They'd be like, yes, fuck it, we'll do it, So, so that seems to be going to plan. All the places are being bombed correctly by the SWAT team, and at Hell Hall, everything's going to plan as well with Jose and Junior. But then we cut back to President, who's still like slowly dissolving or burning away.
You know what I put it? He's like the head vampire, right? He's patient zero. So you gotta like in all the.
But he's not, because he was turned by Haitian vampires or whatever, or Caribbean vampires.
But technically, he's
just a 300-year-old vampire. That's all he is.
Yes,
which isn't that old compared to like, if we're talking about like vampire, like Lestat is like older than him, I think maybe.
True, but in this sense, like he's supposed to be some like old grade vampire at this point. Then technically,
okay.
So that's the only reason I give him.
Haven't you seen Queen of the Damned, John? The best Anne Rice adaptation of all time. She is like thousands of years old.
That's right. R.I.P. Aaliyah.
Fantastic movie. I actually like that movie. It's terrible, but in a fun way. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I remember like enjoying it, being like,
and it has all the new metal I love. It's got a Static X song in it. What are you gonna do?
But anyway, having when you have your big bad vampire, the main one die, like he doesn't die like all the other ones right away. He dies a little bit slower, so you guys can have one or two last little quips or whatever.
I guess, but I thought there was going to be like a scene like the mountain in Game of Thrones where like, Oberon is boasting how he just beat him, and then because he's talking with his back turned to the mountain, he fucking gets his head crushed or whatever. Like, yeah. Like I thought that was going to happen here because they're both talking to the president being like, fuck you, we won, haha. And then like the dad even gets really close to him and puts handcuffs on him. And I thought, is he going to get like his throat ripped out right now? But that's not what happened. It actually ends up okay. And yeah, like I was just kind of like, I guess so. Sure, why not? Then we cut to later on, and we see the first lady, or Abigail Adams, and she's looking at the corpse of her now dissolved husband sitting at the steps of City Hall. And she's like, oh my, I guess we'll have to figure out something else. And then she says a great line, which I thought was a really good written line. And she's like, we'll learn from this moment. And I pity for humanity, because the next battle will be a massacre. And so says the founding mother of the New World. So she apparently is going to be the main big bad in the future series. So that's kind of cool. But then we have a really like touching father-son moment, or it should be touching. I will say I am a sucker for father-son things, And this one didn't really hit me as much. Usually, like, if there's any kind of bickering or like confrontation between fathers and sons, and then they have like a quick resolve at the end, I still like, like Goofy movie or something, like I get like, God damn you. Like, I don't know why, something about that relationship gets me in the feels, but for some reason this one didn't really hit me as hard. I don't know, did it hit you at all?
It didn't, and I'll tell you why. Because I thought it was going to be like that was the old dog's last ride, and he got it. He even says, "I got my man." So like he goes, and it looks like, okay, yeah, maybe he would bury him, but then it shows them talking, and like they're having a laugh, right? And like sunrise is coming on. I'm like, oh, this is perfect. He is going to like stand next to his dad, and they're going to like hug for the first time or whatever, and he's going to like turn to ash or goo in his arms or whatever. And I was
Right.
like, that would be more impactful to me. Like, okay, the dad's last hurrah, they came together. He like made amends basically with his dad. They had a moment, and then like maybe he would scoop up the remains and put them down there, or whatever. Because they did say like even they took John's body back to the his. So maybe John will come back too. Who knows? But it says John. It says they took John Adams' body back to the his tomb or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, so like that's what I thought, and even shows them like hugging, and like his skin starting to like smoke, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. And then now he gets in the coffin and he buries him. I was like, oh, I guess that's okay. And like, so yeah, they can use him for future stories, which is cool. Like, sure, they can use him again, but like I was more like, oh, I think it would have been more impactful if he was like, all right, that was my last hurrah. My son and I, we did it, right? Like we beat the bad guy, and so like I can like be restful and at peace now.
But no, he's just gonna starve for a long time in the ground, I guess, in his coffin.
I guess, yeah.
So that might be why. I also just didn't think, like, maybe there was like it didn't seem earned or something, like the whole time he's having flashbacks of how horrible his dad was, and his dad was pretty bad to him. And then they have like this moment where they defeat the vampires, and then the dad gives him some like fatherly advice and stuff, and says like, you know what, I was wrong. Sorry, I mean, he doesn't say sorry I beat you. He just says, I love you, Jimmy, and I'm sorry. And that's enough for the son, but I don't think that was enough for me or possibly other readers, because it didn't get me like it should have. I mean, I felt a little bit, but I'm like, I feel like there should be a lot more emotion in me right now about this, and I don't have that much of it. So there was a couple things that he said that I'm like, oh, that's kind of a good like way to say that or whatever. But
yeah,
but for the most part, yeah, it didn't hit me like it should have, I thought. So
I get more emotional with Tevin and his grandma, honestly.
Yes, that is true. Very much so. So and also like Brittany and her sister, I thought that was a very endearing moment and touching moment. So but yeah, so that's the end of it. He buries his father again, and then walks into the sunset saying like, all right, there are still vampires in Philadelphia. Some places call it Killadelphia now because of this massacre that happened. And I'm going to be here to stop them, sons of bitches. So he's basically like this city's Blade or something now. Or at least that's what it seems like it's going to be. He accepts the responsibility of killing all these vampires. So that's the end of it. So, John, what did you think, and what would you give it?
I liked it, like despite its couple of story, like, odd points. I think overall, again, I'm a sucker, no pun intended, for vampire stories. So I like the.
No, you can intend that pun. That's a fun pun.
All right, I'm a sucker for him, but I like bringing in John Adams, and I read like the afterwards too. I like the idea of like bringing in American history into it, and I like the idea of John trying to reform, kind of like redo society. Like,
right.
I know that's
like
again,
America 2.0, but with vampires, because
with vampires, yeah. Like I always like that idea, and like again, part of the reason I like that movie Daybreakers, because I like that they show like the after effect to that. But yeah, I would like something in between eventually. I think that's kind of where this might go. So I definitely I want to read more of this. I want to see what's next. I want to see how hot Abigail Adams
does she reopen the sex club. That's what I want to know.
Yeah, no. No, I just mean like, yeah, like, so it's President Vampire John Adams and Hot Abigail Adams.
There you go.
Yeah, I want to see what she's all about now that she's like the queen of the new world or whatever. I'm curious to see like how she takes it. Will there be other characters maybe from the past that come? I'm really curious to see.
I am too. That's one thing I will say about this volume. Even though I had some issues with it, by the end of it, I was like, one, reading through every issue really quickly once I got into the rhythm of his writing style, and two, it made me really want to continue after this.
Yeah, actually, I feel like because we've talked before too about some of the other vampire ones we've read, like well, not they're not vampires, but the one like the oh man, I feel terrible that I'm blanking.
Other vampire ones. What's it about?
So there was the one with the baby, which was an act.
Oh yeah, that one was Baby Teeth or whatever.
Yeah, Baby Teeth.
That was like demons though. That was like Omen.
Yeah, and then there was the one that was like old Hollywood. It started, and then they
American Vampire.
Yeah, American.
Yeah, which I love that. Ooh, you know what? The art, the way that he draws vampires in American Vampire is very similar to the same like poses and the way that the arms are like flailing and stuff, and the face gets all elongated like a snake's when they're like opening their mouth really wide. That's a lot similar, like similar body style of drawing the vampires, at least in motion.
Yeah, I can kind of look back and I think I remember some of that, and like I liked that one too, and I think I do want to go back and read some more of that. I feel bad I haven't.
I read like 4 more trades past that one that we read for American Vampire, and it's solid. It's a good read.
But this one I feel like I actually am gonna like. I saw Ronnie Barnes actually. If you like this or you've been interested in any of his work, I saw that he has a thing on his Patreon where you can get all of his things digitally for like a really good price. I don't remember how much it was, but it was like $15-$20, something like that.
Yeah.
And it was like all of his stuff that he's worked on digitally you can get. And so I was thinking about grabbing that because I would like to read the rest of this. I'm really curious where it goes. Plus, I also want to read the Blackula story, and I'm a sucker for some Star Wars stuff. I know he did like Young Lando Adventures, and it's Donald Glover Lando, so that's kind of cool. So just I feel like this one I did connect with a little bit more, and I was like, I like the idea of this one, so I kind of want to see where it goes. So overall, it was solid. The art is really good in it. I like like I said, I like the vampire story. I did love the alternate covers in the back too. They had some fun covers.
Oh yeah, I thought the covers were really good too.
I really like the one that looks like George Washington or I guess John Adams in his like revolutionary style clothing with the flag and all the blood. That was fun. So yeah, I would give this one a solid 7.5.
Oh, okay, cool. I'm gonna give this one a 6.5 just because I had to read the first issue twice, and I had to really work to get into his writing style. And then I had those like little story hiccups that I was like, wait a second, like that was told to us not correctly or whatever. So like that kind of stuff. I will say it is a fun read. So even with that, I would still continue reading it and stuff. But I think as a first volume, it's solid. Like the story is solid, but it had some issues that I was like that brought it down below a 7. So I'm going to give it a 6.5. I think it is a good read. If you want to read a good vampire story, this one's definitely different and unique. I like the whole like president aspect of it and stuff. But yeah, I did think there was some errors or flaws in it that I just couldn't overlook as a reader. But it is interesting enough of a concept that I want to continue, especially leaving it with Miss Adams, as the like big bad for the next whatever one story arc, or I think it's on, like I said, issue 33. So there's like 4 or 5 at least arcs after this. So yeah, I'm going to give it a 6.5. You give it a 7.5. That being said, our next, or as usual, our next episode, which will be in 2 weeks, is going to be the Patreon voted episode. So if you would like to be a Patreon member and vote on what we read for this next episode, you can go to patreon.com/planes, trains, and comic books. And much like our other patrons, Hoku, Otaku Mike, Christian, Matthew, Kyla, Joseph, and Kalia, you will be able to vote on what we read out of, what are the titles, John?
Yeah, so this month for Black History Month, we are again celebrating Black creators, authors, writers, and we have for our poll the comic Truth, Nita Hawes' Nightmare Blog, Superman versus Muhammad Ali, and Black Panther 19.
Yeah, so we'll put up a poll on Patreon for that. You guys can vote, and whoever wins, we get to read for that for the next episode. And also we're going to do like whatever the second place one is, or maybe one that we wanted to read out of that for the exclusive, because every month we do an exclusive episode as well at the end of the month. So if you want any of that stuff, want to vote, want the exclusive episode, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/Planes, Trains, and Comic Books. And with that being said, you got anything else, John?
Nope. I think we'll see him on the next one.
On the next one.